Mostly Movies, where we mostly talk movies mostly. This week we've got a lot to handle, so let's get right into it. First, we're going to start with Trailer Park. This is taking a look at some movies that are coming to theaters and streaming real soon. The first one up is Predator, and on the surface it looks like another she-boot of a tired franchise that hasn't been good since the Reagan administration. I don't know, instead of doing these stories where it's the boy said I couldn't, why don't they just make it more interesting? Make it like a revenge story. See, if I were writing a Predator movie, I would have a situation where the Predators invade the village, they kill everyone, including her family. She gets captured, she has to escape, and when she's in the jungle, she meets up with some misfits, and they work together against all odds to destroy the Predators. That to me would be more interesting than just the boy said I couldn't type of stories, because then it just becomes a thing. It's just Moana with monsters. It's, very Disney, and I don't like it because it's not fair to women to make these films that are basically, they're supposed to be like these female empowerment films, but women aren't going to see these movies anyway. That's number one. For the most part, they're not interested. And the people that are interested see it as pandering, and they see it as kind of like, just sort of saying, well, we're making something just for you. And it feels very disingenuous. And basically, I don't think I'm interested in seeing that movie at all. I didn't see the last Predator reboot. The last one I believe I saw was the one Predators. I believe it was the Rob Rodriguez produced film. And even that, it had its moments, but it wasn't really that great. So another trailer that I saw this week was The Munsters. I'm a big Rob Zombie fan. I love his films, and I feel that he's a very underrated director. I'm in the minority, and I feel that in about 10 to 20 years, I think people are really going to come around on his films and see that there's more there to his movies than they realize. I give him a lot of credit for making a PG-rated film. I know he probably wanted to do black and white, and that's probably where the studio drew the line. But just the fact that he's attempting to make this is really interesting. Lily looks okay. Grandpa looks okay. The one problem we have is I don't think Herman's going to work, at least from the trailer. I don't really see... You know what it is? You can't replace Fred Gwynn. That's the problem. And they'll try, and I'll give them points for trying, and I do want to see the film, but I don't know how it's going to work out. And then the last film we have is Avatar, The Way of the Water. This is a new James Cameron film. It's been almost as long between Titanic and Avatar as it's been between Avatar and this movie. And I think it's sort of depressing that we haven't had a James Cameron film in many years, and then when he comes back to movies again, we're just getting another Avatar, which in itself was a film that visually was amazing, but I think story-wise was very, very shallow. And that was a surprise for Jim Cameron, because look, he was never the best director in the world, but he is a great director in his own way. The performances have their ups and downs in his films. The dialogue has a lot of ups and downs. He's a lot like George Lucas. Like, I love his style, but what I love about him most, and Lucas has this too, is that, okay, not every line of dialogue is great, but the story is so good, and the story is so compelling, and that's what makes people come back. Even the fans that say they don't like George Lucas' Star Wars movies, they kept coming back over and over again. So there's definitely something there. There's definitely a story there. Although Avatar, I think, was the one time I felt the story was lacking. So that was a little bit strange. But you know what? I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a chance when it comes out, and we'll see what we're going to do with that one. Hopefully it'll turn out okay. We had a bit of a situation with AMC Fathom Events. Apparently, AMC has dropped the ball again with their presentation of G.I. Joe the movie. I had seen Flash Gordon at an AMC a few years ago. Wrong aspect ratio, bad sound, and it just looked terrible. It was a terrible experience. Then I heard recently with The Thing, which I did not see because I actually saw The Thing on the big screen about a year ago at $5 Film Club through flashbackcinema.net. Check it out. So I didn't have to see The Thing again. And then I heard that screening went really bad. As a matter of fact, Mick Garris on Twitter had mentioned that he wouldn't go to see a Fathom event ever again after they ruined that. They showed it in the wrong aspect ratio, and it was a crummy transfer, like a pre-DVD transfer. how could they even have access to such things? It would just be easier to put on a 4K disc and project it on the big screen than to go through all the trouble of something that's subpar. So we're going to see G.I. Joe the movie, and I was so excited. And my brother unfortunately couldn't make it, but it was just me, and I was hoping for something great because this is a movie that I always dreamed of seeing in a theater, and I never thought I'd have the opportunity. And I still don't have the opportunity because when the movie started, the transfer was terrible, the sound was terrible. It was just a complete nightmare. It looked as if somebody got the VHS transfer, put it onto an MPEG file or an MP3 file, and projected that rather than a high def or a 4K file. I was really shocked and really upset. It was full frame. I got up. I sat there. There was about 6 or 7 other dudes in the theater. There was no ladies going to see G.I. Joe the movie. It's like I looked at these guys around me and I'm like, oh, you couldn't drag your girlfriend here either, right? But basically, I walked out after the opening scene. I was not going to sit through the rest of the movie looking like that. And then a friend of mine saw it at Cinemark and he said it was fine. It said it looked really good. So I don't know. Maybe it's just an AMC thing, but whatever it is, I'm not going to bother again with that. So then I made the mistake of instead of getting my money back, instead I went to see another movie. So it was an hour for the Black Phone or Top Gun to start. And those are the only 2 other movies I wanted to see. So I had the unfortunate dilemma of sitting through Lightyear. And I don't know what to say about this movie. It's basically it's the lowest quality like Pixar has made. I mean, I never saw Planes. I saw the first Cars. I never saw the other ones. So I don't know. Maybe it's not the worst Pixar movie, but it's the Pixar film I hate the most. Because you used to see the name Pixar and it used to mean something because they used to make one great film after another. They had Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles. Then they had, like Ratatouille and Wall-E and Up. They were making one great movie after another. And it just, in these last 10 years, it seems everybody, all the studios, have just taken the easiest way out that they could. The lowest common denominator films, basically movies that are shallow and hollow and have nothing to say. And they put them out there with the confidence that we're going to go see them and make these people $1 billion. And this film is diet Pixar. It's a form of Pixar, but denying the power thereof. And it's basically Buzz Lightyear's attempting to escape from this planet with a group of misfits, and then they're pursued by Zurg. And the movie is just so boring. I sat in the back of the theater because I had a feeling this was going to happen. The movie is so boring, I actually started working on the review while I'm in the theater. And almost every adult in the place was on their phone, and their kids are just kind of like sleeping or writhing around in their seats. And it's just, the movie is just so ridiculous. And then they had a good twist with Zurg and who his character was. And they found a way to screw that up by using the J.J. Abrams School of Science, which is basically, we're going to present an idea that's pretty cool, but rather than explain how it works or what it means, we're just going to basically tell the audience not to worry about it. And that's stupid. Like, that's really a bad idea. So the one thing in this movie that could have been good, they found a way to screw up. And then it just becomes, Buzz Lightyear telling this bad guy all about friendship and how the years they were stranded on the planet were worth more to him than reversing all of it. So it just becomes this okey wokey sermon about, friendship and all that stuff. And yes, the movie is very woke. And how I define woke, people have different ideas about what it means. To me, it's basically pretending you care about a person or persons or a cause, but you really don't care. You're just pretending to care to look good, to look virtuous. Because if Disney was truly progressive, they would say, we're going to keep all those scenes in that they had to cut from the Chinese release, which is basically all of the lesbian relationship in the movie. and that one of the characters is married and has a child with another woman. If Disney was truly progressive, they would tell China this is in the movie, and you can either take the movie as it is or not have the movie at all. But they're not really progressive. They're just trying to look good to people. It's all about public relations, and it's all about making money. Money will outweigh anybody's feelings, anybody's causes, any kind of virtue system that they have in place, because all these studios really care about is money. If they didn't, the Chinese poster of The Force Awakens would have Oscar Isaac and John Boyega featured prominently as they are on the American poster. All the references to other stuff that they have to cut out to appease the Chinese, that would all be in there too. So I don't really take anything they have to say seriously, how they're taking a stand for anybody's rights. And believe it or not, it's like if you're going to have an openly gay relationship in a Disney movie, you pick a boring, stupid movie like Lightyear to put it in. I mean, you're not really doing much to help with putting it in a movie like that. And, just Buzz Lightyear running around with his fat face. And it's like, this is just really dumb. I mean, the best part of this movie was the cat. It's like somebody goes to see the movie Alien and they're like, well, Alien was a terrible film, but I love that cat, and that was about it. And this doesn't have the charm or the humor of the Toy Story movies, doesn't even have the charm or humor of the Buzz Lightyear animated series that ran weekdays in the early 2000s. I mean, this movie's just a black hole, which is actually a Disney film that is much more entertaining and interesting. And if you want to stream The Black Hole, it's on Disney Plus. It will freak you out. This week on From the Vault, I went a little bit out on a limb and I chose a movie that I've never seen before. It was in one of my watch piles. I have several of movies that I've had for some of them. This one here, Cries and Whispers, I've had over a decade. Still has the Hollywood Video sticker on it. Rest in peace, Hollywood Video. I got it during one of their last day sales. It was in the watch pile for a long time. I always wanted to see it because I do respect Ingmar Bergman, even though I don't always get his films. I struggle with a lot of times with European cinema because I feel that it has more to do with mood and creating an atmosphere than really telling a story. I think when it comes to me, I'm really from the American tradition of story, story, story. And that's why it's a bit of a challenge for me to watch movies from other places, depending on the culture and depending on what the movie's about. I mean, if it's a Japanese like docudrama, I might struggle with that one. But if it's a samurai movie, I'll sit through it, or if it's martial arts or something like that. That's what I loved about Kurosawa, because Kurosawa got me to watch movies that were not necessarily samurai films. Like if you take a film like Ikiru, which is incredible, that's probably his best film. And a lot of people will fight me on that because they're like, oh, Seven Samurai and Yojimbo and all that. And those are great, don't get me wrong. But Ikiru is just such a beautiful, wonderful film. And I don't know why I'm talking about that, because I'm not really interested in Cries and Whispers, because it's good. It's well acted. I admire Bergman's style and the way that it's made. But again, if I don't have a story I can follow, that I can't get into it. I mean, I'm giving it horns up. I am. Just for the style, just for the performances. And I like the way that he films things, Bergman. I love the way that he uses the frame. He's really good at that. I just wish that there was more. The craft is great, but I just wish there was a little bit more story to work with here. But maybe I'm just adult who doesn't understand art cinema. It's quite possible. Do a segment called Cross the Streams. This is where we look at 3 movies that are on streaming, or we call movies, motion pictures, movies. Could we call streaming films streamies? Streamies. It sounds kind of strange. But first up on Peacock, we have a film that played in theaters while it played on Peacock. I'm very grateful to Peacock. I wish all the other companies did this, because sometimes I just don't have the time to get out to the theater. It's a movie called Northman. It's directed by Robert Eggers, who did The Lighthouse and The Witch. Haven't seen The Lighthouse. I did see The Witch. I don't remember a thing about it. It was very confusing. People loved it and went crazy over it. And I said to myself, I definitely have to see this again, because everybody seems to love it more than I do. And I love how it looks. I love the music. I like the framing. I like the performances, but I don't know what's going on in this movie. I have no idea what's going on. So at some point I might watch it again. So The Northman is not a hard movie to follow. I think that it's more cohesive than his other films. It's beautiful looking. The story is a little more straightforward. Some people have compared it to Gladiator or Braveheart, which is not really a great comparison because it has more of a Game of Thrones feeling. It's more gritty and more real world. I'd also compare it to the 2015 Macbeth with Michael Fassbender, which is actually a great film. I still got to see the new one with Denzel, but the one with Michael Fassbender that came out around 6 years ago was very, very good, 6, 7 years ago. And again, this is a mood piece. It's, again, not much of a story. But the problem I have with this movie is that it starts with some promise. And there's some idea that there's something interesting going on here. Then it quickly devolves into this ugly revenge story that just drags and drags forever. And it's very pretentious. And it's a bummer. It's really a bummer, this movie. It's depressing. It has a small scale to it. I mean, I'm not going to get on them. They probably didn't have a big budget. But the movie is just, you can't get behind this guy. The way, like, William Wallace, I know William Wallace in Braveheart, and even the guy Maximus in what's his name, in Gladiator. I don't even forget his name. Those characters were somewhat, not to say that you want the character to be likable. Of course, there was a lot of Hollywood BS thrown into both of those movies for dramatization purposes. I mean, it's not a documentary on William Wallace. But I feel like you could sort of follow their revenge, whereas the revenge is just so depraved and sickening. And basically, not to give much away, but this character wants revenge for the man who killed his father and took over the kingdom. And then the new king was chased out by invaders. So now he lives as a sheep farmer on some island. So it seems like, well, why do you even need revenge on this guy? He was a king and now he's a sheep farmer. It doesn't make sense. But it just gets so nasty and it's just such a hateful film. I'm sorry to say, horns down for The Northman. And on Shudder, we have a film called Mad God. This might be the first movie review vlog where we review Mad God and Cries and Whispers in the same episode. Now, that would be a pretty interesting double feature. Mad God is a disturbing fever dream. It's from Phil Tippett, who was a stop motion animator. He used to work on old Star Wars movies and things like that. And he just sets this character on this grotesque wasteland and this journey. You don't know exactly what he's looking for or what it is, but it gets more depraved and disgusting by the second. I can't say I liked it, but I did admire it, and I did think it was very interesting that it was something very different. Like, this isn't just another, Marvel movie or something like this is just really something different and original and strange. And I got to give I'm giving the movie horns down, unfortunately. I feel very bad about doing this, but because it's so original and it's so unique, Tippett's vision. So I won't say it's all for nothing, but it's just too much. It's a little too disgusting, and there's not much of a story going on. It's not my particular cup of tea, but I have a strong feeling, and judging by what Shudder has said, that it's one of their biggest debuts on the service, it's destined to become a cult classic. Something on the level of Eraserhead, where people are watching it forever and trying to figure out, what does it mean? What is it all about? And I wouldn't even be surprised if I know I have to see it again. I'm probably not going to see it again today or tomorrow, but someday I'll check it out again and give it another look, because it is really unlike anything else out there. But, word of warning, it's an extremely gross and sickening film. But, you got to applaud the vision behind it. It was all done with stop motion animation, which is sort of a lost art. It was like basically as big a deal as if someone says, I'm going to do a cartoon all drawn by hand again and not CGI. So I give Phil Tippett and his crew a lot of credit for having the guts to make something so bonkers in this world of reboots and identity politics and woke and all this nonsense that we have to deal with at most movies today. This is a movie that has none of that. This movie is like right out of like the mid 80s when they were still letting crazy movies get made. But lastly, we're going to go to Paramount Plus and we're going to talk about a television series, limited series that I really, really enjoyed. It's called The Offer. And it's about the making of The Godfather. It's a dramatized version of the making of The Godfather. And they take some liberties. There's a lot of print the legend in this film, especially if you read Evan's book or if you read other books about Coppola and classic Hollywood at that time. And I understand that. Just like Ed Wood was one of my favorite movies, there's a lot of liberties taken in these movies because it's a show, it's a movie, it's a dramatization, it's not a documentary, it's based on a true story. It isn't a true story. Highly recommended. Anybody that's interested in filmmaking and the process of filmmaking, this series will just blow your mind. And for me, I went crazy because I love shows about classic Hollywood. I also love anything to do with real world mobsters and true crime. And to combine classic Hollywood and gangsters, I knew I would love this right off the bat. And I did. Right from the first episode, Matthew Good's performance as Robert Evans is a career best for him. But also Miles Teller does a very good job as the producer, Albert Ruddy. And to me, I think the character that really is the conscience of this work, or at least of Ruddy, would be Juno Temple and her role as Betty. She's great as Ruddy's assistant. And she's an actress, too, that I thought was always very good, but just doesn't seem to be in the roles that she does. She's always in roles that she deserves better as an actor. And I think in this case, she gets it. And it's a great show. It's a lot of fun. There are some big laughs. Again, Matthew Good, I'm sorry. Matthew Wood is General Grievous. I'm going to get mixed up. Matthew Good is so amazing. And I've loved him in everything. I loved him in The Lookout, Watchmen, whatever he's in, he's good. Leap Year is another movie he's done with Amy Adams. If you haven't seen Leap Year, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful romantic comedy that takes place in Ireland. What I would do in terms of The Offer is I would watch The Godfather first, which just happens to be on Paramount Plus. It's the new restoration, and it looks fantastic. I still got to get the Godfather trilogy in 4K. I'm going to do that soon. I love the Godfather movies. The third one has a lot of issues, but I still love it. I mean, it's not as good as the other two. But it has its qualities, especially I liked Eli Wallach in the film. Joe Mantegna is very good in the film. I wish he was in more of the film. That was part of the problem with that movie. Problem with Godfather 3, well, Andy Garcia and Sofia Coppola are one part of the problem. But the biggest problem with Godfather 3 was the structure. That all the best stuff in that movie is in the middle. The beginning is okay, the ending is but the middle of Godfather 3 is great. They should have restructured that whole script and kept that helicopter scene. That should have all been at the end of the film. Because it would be like, imagine you're watching the first Godfather movie and the baptism is in the middle, right? So that's how you could have fixed Godfather 3. I did like the director's cut, the coda. It was a little bit better, but not by much. It didn't make that big of a difference. But Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 are two of the greatest films ever made. So it's very hard for Godfather 3, even if it were good, to be in the same company as those films. I mean, on its own, it is a good film, I think. But when compared to the other two, it just didn't need to be made. But I would say watch The Godfather. If you want to watch The Offer, watch The Godfather or watch The Godfather again, because Godfather's worth seeing over and over and over again. You know, I see it at least once a year or more. But watch that film again and then watch The Offer. And also, too, another thing I'm going to recommend, and this one's a little harder to find, but Bob Evans wrote a great book called The Kid Stays in the Picture. And it was turned into a documentary, The Kid Stays in the Picture, which is worth seeing. Unfortunately, it's a little pricey. If you buy it online, I think they're selling it for like $15. But you can rent it off of Amazon or iTunes. But what I would rather you do is go on the app called Hoopla and check out the audiobook. Unfortunately, it is abridged, so it's only 6 hours long. But I listened to it over the last week, and it's a great book. And it's basically Robert Evans talking about his time in Hollywood. The kid stays in the picture. Feature tonight is going to be $5 Film Club. This is where we take a film that, through the help of flashbackcinema.net, is showing for $5 at some local theaters across the country. And it was a great honor to once again see Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is a film that, as much as I like the other Indiana Jones films, even the fourth one I like a little, this is a film that has always been my favorite of the series since I was a little kid. And I wasn't doing it to be a contrarian, because a lot of people love Raiders and Last Crusade and they hated this movie. And I usually can't stand those people that like the worst movie in the series and say that it's their favorite. That sometimes gets on my nerves. But this is a case where the one that's the least popular is the one that really, really speaks to me. And usually when an entry in the series is the black sheep, it's not necessarily that it's the best one, but it's the most interesting one. Okay, like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is not the best in the series. It's not as good as 1 or 3. But after 1 and 3, I really like Freddy's Revenge. Because it's so different, because it's so bizarre, because it has a lot of insane subtext in there, which is great. And that's the problem. That's what's missing in films today that films in the 80s had in spades. Subtext. Because rather than just being a bunch of crybabies because they don't like who's the president, what they did in the 80s was they put all of their feelings into their art. They didn't just tweet it out and say, we don't like you, tweet, tweet, tweet. No, they put their feelings about everything they felt was wrong with the world in their work. And that's why films of the 80s have a lot of them have a lot of great subtext, particularly in the horror genre, because of that. But back to Temple of Doom. The action, the humor, the gory scenes, the cute scenes with the kids and with Short Round. This movie is much more like a modern film than it was films of its own time. And it was definitely very violent. It led to the creation of the PG-13 rating, which we saw a lot of crazy stuff in PG-rated movies as kids. So the PG-13 rating was actually a good idea, in my opinion, because it basically gave filmmakers a little bit more freedom to go a little further with jokes, a little further with things without going too far and get slapped with an R rating. Because, R ratings are tricky because you automatically have trouble finding an audience because you can't get as many people in. So PG-13, although PG-13, it took a while for that rating to get profitable. PG-13 movies didn't really make much money either, until probably around the time of Batman. That's when things kind of shifted. And that's when PG movies in the 90s started getting really tame. Because if you want to do something that's got a little bit of edge to it, you would get a PG-13 rating. Now, the movie starts with a big musical number where Kate Capshaw comes out and sings Anything Goes in Mandarin. And Anything Goes is definitely the motto of this film. It is Indiana Jones, and it's working in the framework of an Indiana Jones film and a Spielberg film, but pretty much anything can happen in this movie, and anything does happen in this movie. This movie is loaded with just insanity and anything you can imagine until the end, from beginning to end. It's a prequel because they couldn't find a place to put Marion in this story. So they had to basically start from scratch, and they had a whole new clean slate, which actually is a pretty brilliant idea when you think about it. And it's interesting too. I've never done it, but I know friends of mine have watched the trilogy, starting with Temple of Doom, then watching Raiders, then watching Last Crusade. And I've still got to try that one day. I haven't done it. But the first time I saw this movie was the summer of '85. We rented it because I was too young to see it in theaters. And I'm kind of glad that my brothers didn't take me when I saw it, because there's some really wacky stuff in this film. A lot of violence and a lot of mayhem. But I remember watching it on TV. We're eating pizzas from Joy's. Don't look for it. It's not there anymore, on Staten Island. And we rented it from Video Image, also not there anymore. Rest in peace, Video Image and Joy's Pizza. But I just remember watching this film and being just totally blown away by it. And my brothers liked Raiders more at the time. But after I saw this movie, I'm like, you know what? this is a this is like the greatest movie. This is so much better than Raiders. And I love Raiders of the Lost Ark, don't get me wrong. To this day, I think it's still an incredible film. But Temple of Doom, I just felt like Tarantino once said something that's interesting. He says, when you make a specific film, you're going to turn some people off, but you're going to turn some people on too. Like some people will want to see something that's different and something that's not like your usual movie. So I think that movie really worked out. It just really captured my imagination because there was just so many crazy things in it, and it was so different from anything else that was out here. I love the music too by John Williams. John Williams really extended himself on this project because he was doing different kinds of music and different genres and stuff that he had never done before. And there's a lot of dark tones in this music, especially when they're in the Thuggy Temple. I mean, that stuff is really scary and really intense, and he does a great job with it. Next week, Flashback Cinema is doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and they have a few other screenings coming up. Now, when it comes to Temple of Doom, I used to play the video game. There was an arcade game, which we liked. It was really hard. Then there was the NES game. When I got the NES, the Christmas of '89, one of the games I got for it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which I didn't beat for the longest time until the 2000s when we started getting video game walkthroughs, and I figured out the different map screens, and that's how I was able to get through level 10, get to the rope bridge, and whip Molaram into next week. So basically that was that. They also made one for the Super Nintendo, the Indiana Jones Greatest Adventures, which was a great game, which I liked a lot more at the time because it seemed a little bit easier when I was first playing it. I tried to play the Temple of Doom levels this week. I had all the passwords and I just couldn't get through any of it. It's just really, really hard. But thanks for listening, guys, and I'll be back probably next week or the coming weeks. I'm going to be working again. Summer school's coming up, so I probably won't be making as many videos in the future, but hopefully we'll have a few things up. All right, this is Mostly Movies, signing off.